Hi there, I'm Tim Autrey, and welcome to Principle-Based Performance Improvement, where we combine timeless wisdom with modern science and practical tools to help you move yourself and your organization toward better, safer, and more productive outcomes. In this Take-Ten episode, I'm going to talk about transformation, what it is, why it's important, and how it's nothing like the slow and often temporary incremental change promoted in many performance improvement arenas. Then I'm going to show you how the 3-step transformation framework aligns with the 7 natural principles of human performance to provide a simple recipe for transforming yourself, your team, and your entire organization. And we're going to do all of this in about 10 minutes. To begin, it's important to understand that we're not here to talk about incremental change. You know, blips in behaviors or metrics that disintegrate as soon as the newness wears off or the monitoring stops. We're here to talk about transformation, which is irreversible and self-sustaining. A great example of natural transformation can be found in the life of a monarch butterfly, which begins with an egg deposited on a leaf. 4 days later, a hungry baby caterpillar emerges. The caterpillar eats and eats and eats and eats until its body chemistry lets it know that it's time to begin the transformation process. It finds the right place, attaches itself upside down on a leaf or stem, and wriggles out of its old skin into what's called a chrysalis. The chrysalis then hardens, and over the next 10 days, a true miracle of nature occurs as the lowly caterpillar transforms into a beautiful butterfly. Now imagine if you and I could discover a process where in a short amount of time, we could transform from what we currently are into something bigger, better, and even prettier. Well, I'm not sure about the prettier part, but the rest is entirely possible, and there's a simple method for making it happen. It's a simple 3-step progression called the transformation framework. You know, monarchs have tiny little brains. They exist purely on instinct as they progress through their irreversible physical transformation. We humans, on the other hand, are much more complex. Our power to transform lies between our ears, and it only occurs when we consistently make different choices, take different actions, and exhibit different behaviors. On the most basic level, our desires to either avoid pain or acquire pleasure are what prompt us to change something about ourselves or our situation. Once a specific desire becomes strong enough, it challenges our internal sense of equilibrium, and we begin to think different about whatever it happens to be. Thinking different eventually causes us to feel different. Feelings then at some point prompt us to make different choices, in other words, to do different. And while transformation is pre-programmed, automatic, and irreversible for butterflies, for you and me, once again, it's quite different. Even when you or I decide to test the waters and make a change, doing so once or twice does not mean we've transformed. Without adequate repetition and consistency, we all too often revert back to our comfort zones. We do an exercise in some of our training sessions using a couple of identical rubber bands. We ask participants to hold one of the rubber bands out in front of them, stretch it to shoulder width, and then set it down next to the other rubber band and examine any differences. There aren't any. We then have them pick up the first rubber band, repeat the stretching process a couple dozen times, and then compare it to the one on the table. As you can see here, after doing so, there's a substantial difference in size. But here's the real insight. In our training sessions, both rubber bands sit in front of each participant for the remainder of the training, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, or in the case of our certification summit, for the rest of the week. The stretched rubber band does not return to its original size, not even close, because its structure has transformed. This is how it most often works for you and me. 1 or 2 iterations, incremental change, rarely sustains. It's too easy, too convenient, and often far more comfortable to return to our previous state. However, once we've stretched enough to transform, our brains have actually changed. They've rewired. As Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. put it, a mind stretched to a new dimension can never go back to its old dimension. As my favorite tonal trainer, Tony Horton, has told me over and over, consistency is king. I found this to be true in every aspect of life, from physical fitness to mindset and mental fitness to making any changes that last. In other words, transformation. Now, let's talk about your team or organization. Not only do we want to inspire team members to want to do right things in right ways, we seek to align choices, actions, and behaviors such that we are all collectively moving in the same direction, while also leveraging the diverse insights and perspectives of different individuals. This almost sounds contradictory, doesn't it? I first visited the Henry Ford Museum in Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan in the late 1990s. If you've never been there before, man, put it on your list. It is an awesome collection of the energy and innovation that built America. I was amazed when I wandered into a room housing a section of an old assembly line. A sign mounted on a support post in the middle of the room bore a Henry Ford quote, which read, "Unfortunately, every time I hire a pair of hands, they come attached to a set of brains." I couldn't believe it. Since when is people using their brains unfortunate? Ford was apparently frustrated with employees who had their own thoughts and ideas. Not only did this highlight apparent tension between management and the front line, it also implied that, while he valued physical labor, Henry was not a fan of independent thinking. Now, we traveled back to Dearborn a couple of years ago. I wanted to snap a picture of that sign. Unfortunately, it had been removed and I couldn't find it anywhere. Perhaps even the museum keepers have come to recognize that in today's complex and rapidly changing world, no one of us is as smart as all of us. I'm telling you this story because in this world of performance improvement, we continue to be bludgeoned with dusted off versions of old school rules and tools wrapped in shiny boxes. And tons of consultants and salespeople are doing their darndest to impress us with their latest bells and whistles. This is especially true as virtually everyone scrambles to jump on the AI bandwagon. The thing is, when it comes to people, if you don't get under the covers of what makes people tick, anything supposedly new, even if it has AI attached to it, will simply not work, at least not for the long term. So then, how can we possibly tap into the genius that each team member might be bringing to the table while also aligning choices, actions, and behaviors on a job such that we move closer and closer to functioning as one team with one goal, having one conversation? This sounds overwhelming. Some people even think it's impossible. However, by combining the transformation framework with the power of the 7 natural principles of human performance, it's completely doable. Let's take a look. First, focusing on and running things based on the 7 natural principles is how you get under the covers to continuously promote and support desired choices, actions, and behaviors. As you should already be aware, the hub of the 7 natural principles is trust. This is a must-have without which you're dead in the water. Its presence or lack thereof permeates, infiltrates, and impacts everything. All right then, stage 1. Think different. This is where the principles of power, in other words, the perceptions that there's a balance between control and self-control, come into play. It impacts pretty much how we think about everything. Likewise, to think constructively and proactively, each of us must perceive that we're making progress, that we're moving towards something that we deem to be worthwhile. With this in place, stage is now set to feel different. Work environments require good relationships and lots of collaboration. Since we are social creatures, the extent to which we sense that we belong, that we're part of the team, is essential to how we feel about ourselves, our work, and our colleagues. Now, in addition to needing to feel like we belong, we also long to feel better about ourselves, which happens when we sense appreciation from others. As psychologist William James put it, the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. And finally, there's do different. The remaining natural principles wrap an active cause and effect bow around the others. When high levels of respect and justice are present, teams and organizations run very well. On the other hand, when either of these is lacking, watch out below. Things can and often do degrade very rapidly. Okay, it's time to wrap up this episode. If you have any questions or comments about what we've been talking about, I'd love to hear them. Use the link provided in the comments section below this video. And if you're finding these insights helpful, please share them with your friends and colleagues. Help your search engine find more content like this for you by hitting the like button before you leave. And if these PPI messages resonate with you, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next one. Until next time, my friend, be safe, stay humble, and make a difference.